Gentlemen, it has just been discovered that the Shadow Fleet, which is importing illegal so-called oil, is also a floating intelligence center. There are thousands of them out there, all equipped by Russia and China to spy on America. A new report just dropped, and it's a bombshell. Putin's intelligence agencies were spying on American nuclear weapons in Europe, using ships from the Shadow Fleet to do it. This isn't a one-time incident. It's a planned government program primarily targeting bases where American nuclear gravity bombs are stored. Today, we'll break down exactly how the tankers that import sanctioned oil have turned into floating platforms for launching reconnaissance drones over NATO's most sensitive military sites. And here's what NATO, which is probably even more interesting, is planning to do about it. Gentlemen, if a report is out, NATO and America have likely known about it for a while. So, the London International Institute for Strategic Studies, one of the most authoritative analytical organizations in the world on military issues, published a report on June 2nd called Russia's Drone Campaign. The Institute analyzed 144 suspicious cases of drone appearances over the territory of 13 European countries during the period. They took the period from August 2024 to February 2026, meaning the campaign has been ongoing for 15 months. The campaign refers to Russia's intelligence campaign. Over the past 2 years, mysterious drones, as we were told, have been repeatedly spotted over military bases all across Europe. That doesn't mean NATO thought they were mysterious. Maybe they knew perfectly well that they weren't mysterious at all. And over the places where things are stored, it was specifically over American nuclear weapons that they were swarming. At the same time, these drones were also testing the reaction and response time of NATO air defense systems. Many suspected Russia from the very beginning, but there wasn't really any open evidence. There was no evidence in the public domain, so to speak, right? The main question wasn't who, but how. How did these drones even reach NATO airspace if they were flying directly from Russia or even Belarus? Well, it's physically impossible to cover that distance. Now there's an answer. And it's unusually, well, as they say in this report, alarming. I dare say that NATO doesn't think so. The Institute compared the specific locations where drones appeared with the coordinates of the Shadow Fleet ships. The operation was definitely carried out on assignment from the Americans or NATO, or by that very network of tankers, without proper registration or insurance, under flags of convenience that Russia has used for years to transport oil, sanctioned, of course, not permitted, to China, India, and other friendly countries. It turned out that these same vessels were also used as mobile launch and landing platforms for drones. First and foremost, for tactical reconnaissance drones like the Orlan 10 compact devices with a range of about 300 miles and a flight time of up to 16 hours. So it goes there, hovers for 5 or 6 hours, hits the target, returns back, and recharges. They are capable of operating directly from international waters or from regular commercial shipping lanes without attracting attention. I want to jump ahead right away and say that I'll share my point of view later about why, all of a sudden, something that was obvious and completely clear happened out of nowhere. NATO knows, but you can't just fly over our bases for a year and a half without us noticing. That's right, yes. But all this time we kept noticing, pointing it out, and just saying, oh, where did they come from? We don't know. Oh, why? What are they doing here? I have an idea about why this happened now. So the list of targets is impressive, really. In November 2024, there was a week-long series of drone incursions over the base in the county of Suffolk. Suffolk, the American air base, which was being prepared for the deployment of nuclear air bombs. If the bombs were brought in, they were brought in later. And in July 2025, as they say, they were not present there yet. There were 3 more American facilities in England, including RAF Fairford. For some reason, when I speak Russian, I can't seem to fit in English words. Next, the French submarine base at Ile in Britain, where the main part of France's naval nuclear potential is based. Next, air bases in Belgium and the Netherlands, also associated with the storage of American nuclear weapons. And a separate episode is the drones launched directly from a Russian reconnaissance ship towards the French aircraft carrier. This happened in December 2005 in the Irish Sea during Zelensky's visit to Dublin. Well, now they were showing that supposedly they can reach out their hand there too. 4 large military-grade drones circled for 2 hours, surrounding a Dutch military ship. What was it called? Leonard something. At the same time, nearby, about 37 miles away, there was a vessel under the Maltese flag, which had previously been detained by Swedish authorities on suspicion of damaging underwater cables in the Baltic Sea. So, are you telling me that NATO didn't pay any attention to this at all? Well, full speed ahead. I mean, I don't believe it for a single second. According to the lead author of the report, senior researcher Charlie Edwards, the likelihood that this is a planned Kremlin program is extremely high. A coincidence in geography and chronology over 15 months in 13 countries simply cannot be explained by chance. I love these researchers, scientists, and so on, right? He sits at the university and it's extremely high. So the objectives turned out to be or were called the following: reconnaissance of nuclear facilities, assessment of the overall condition of NATO countries' armed forces, mapping of logistics hubs through which military aid to Ukraine passes. I think this was important for them, as well as economic and psychological pressure on European governments. I can't believe this for a single second. It was specifically drones over military bases and airports in Germany, Spain, and Denmark. They temporarily halted civilian aviation operations, which did happen. Yes, it did. The peak months for the number of incidents were around September, October. Well, that's September, October, maybe November of last year. I remember that it ended about a month before Christmas. Moreover, most of the cases were recorded specifically in Germany, where the count reached hundreds per year, and they never even imagined where all of this was coming from. My God, what do they take us for, right? According to the author of the report, the main goal is much more cynical than simple intelligence gathering. To demonstrate, well, why do they write to us, feed us nonsense, that Russia did this? To demonstrate that Russia is capable of penetrating NATO airspace with impunity. So I would put it this way. We let them fly over our territory so they would think certain things and so on, including over nuclear facilities, without crossing the line that would trigger a collective military response from the alliance. In other words, the whole point of the operation, as they tell us, is to act just as brazenly as possible without risking a real war. And judging by the fact that in 15 months not a single fool has been shot down by Western military forces, and by fool, I mean a drone, they haven't managed to shoot one down. Tsk, tsk. That calculation paid off completely, as stated in the report. Let's, so to speak, treat it that way then. They're always trying to make fools out of us. Well, sometimes we just nod our heads, as they say, because, well, we're too lazy, right? Yeah, we agree. Just leave us alone already, that's it. Now what I promised to talk about a bit later, and believe me, you can't even imagine how interesting it is. It's interesting, alarming, truly dangerous. Russia is playing, well, what you might call on the edge of a foul, that's clear. But how to determine exactly where that line actually is, that's not very clear. People can see it differently from different perspectives. Closer to the end of the video, we'll talk about what choices NATO now faces. To sink or not to sink, to be or not to be. To seize these very ships of the Taramov fleet right in the open sea, and what is needed for this from a legal point of view. And this is where things get really interesting. The most interesting part begins because we needed to have legal grounds to stop, inspect, seize, sink, I don't know, turn back. Which one to sink? Board it, then take it to our place and drain the oil for ourselves, right? Well, by ourselves, I mean all the participants in this whole bacchanalia. So what you mean is there's a ship sailing with unauthorized oil, and it's not really breaking any particular rules, right? They stop it and ask, where are the drones that were flying around? So are there drones or not? They find them, yes, they find them. Or they find something that could have served as a launch pad for this drone. Aha, Ivan Ivanovich, and I said, well, all right. Closer to the end of this video, we'll talk about the choice NATO now faces, to sink or to capture. To capture or to sink. These very ships, you know, from the Shadow Fleet. But make sure to watch until the end, because there will also be a second part to this story, much darker and much more recent. Just a few hours ago, something happened this very night that is directly related to everything we're talking about. It's very intriguing and interesting. Isn't it the NATO intelligence structure? While the warning is being sounded. A warning to Russia, no plan of action. We're not saying yet that we're going to seize your ships, but behind our studied silence, we've got force in reserve, just so you know, right? The official representative of the Alliance Naval Command stated, "Inform any actor considering hostile activity. Make it absolutely clear to them, we are watching you. The Allies are monitoring everything that happens in the maritime space, and as the NATO representative stated, have the capabilities to respond." As if Russia didn't know that. Who are they saying this to? Us, perhaps? Whether it's attempts at sabotage against underwater infrastructure or drones launched from maritime platforms. But they haven't told us about any specific actions yet. There are few of them. Why? Because the number of incidents has decreased. After the Europeans, paid up. The flotillas started physically detaining individual ships of the Shadow Fleet in 2026. Pretty cool, right? In particular, the French authorities boarded the tanker Barakai off the coast of Sicily, and President Macron directly stated that he could not rule out its involvement with the drones over Denmark, and he also can't rule out its involvement in the war between the Red and White Rose. That's some flawless logic as well. If the ships of the Shadow Fleet are used as a platform for hostile actions against NATO military facilities, including nuclear bases, this was added just to scare us. Nuclear bases, they're studying ours. This is no longer a gray area of sanction evasion. This is direct hostile activity against the alliance. So it's time to arrest them, obviously, right? I'm very much in favor of this. By the way, of course they should be arrested, just so you don't get the wrong idea, right? It's just a ridiculously funny game going on. And NATO has every legal ground, the spokesperson said, to sink or seize such ships without much hesitation. But who would sink them when they're carrying oil, right? Well, why sink them? Otherwise, it turns into an absurd situation. Like, while the diplomats are writing their reports, drones keep flying over facilities where nuclear materials and such are physically stored without any consequences, figuring out how long it takes for air defense, blah, 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 to react. Well, right away, I want to tell you that, of course, there is every reason to believe that Russia is doing this, and that Russia is not alone. China, so to speak, by the way, China launched reconnaissance balloons. That's what they called them, I think, over the territory of the U.S. Biden, that is, the Biden administration, promised to publicly reveal a much broader picture of global drone operations against the infrastructure of allies. Well, that means us. Yes, but they still haven't done it. Maybe the point is that behind the modest word Russia, there's also China acting in parallel and in a similar way. So that's why we, don't really arrest these ships. If it were only Russia, I think by now, the French would already be sniffing around, so to speak. You board a ship and get free oil. Awesome. That's it. All right. All my new videos and my personal comments on current events are on my Telegram channel, Leon Weinstein. The link will be, as usual, below in the description. The outcome is actually quite unpleasant, to be honest. It turns out that the sanctioned tankers, which were formerly a tool to bypass the oil embargo, in reality for years also served as a reconnaissance and sabotage network, right at the doorstep of NATO's nuclear arsenal. But the good news is that the secret has truly become known. The report has been published, specific vessels have been named, specific routes and dates have been documented, and European fleets have already started detaining these vessels one by one. Well, not too many so far, but at least they've started, yes. The first step is always the hardest. Or, I think Gorbachev would say, the first step is always the hardest. Or something like that. Was he in general a genius in this sense? Not stupid, but, so to speak, talented. I don't know, maybe Russian wasn't his native language, or maybe he grew up in a society where, so to speak, people didn't know how to speak Russian properly. Well, never mind, let's leave Gorbachev aside. A system that had been operating in the shadows for at least 15 months was finally brought to light, and what is visible and documented is much easier to stop than what is hidden in the fog of the Shadow Fleet. And I want to wish our sailors good hunting for tankers, full of good, high-quality Iranian or some other oil, which is going unsanctioned, supposedly or clearly equipped with a drone launch system, and that's why it can and should be arrested. Hooray! Long live international law. Well, that's all. Until next time, Dima Torzak.